All right, so get this. What if there was a way to automate things online, even without APIs?
It's like a whole secret world of automation just waiting to be discovered.
Exactly. We're about to dive deep into the world of headless browsers, thanks to this article I found on the Latenode platform. They're a low-code automation platform doing some really interesting stuff.
Low code is definitely changing the game, making this kind of tech accessible to way more people.
Absolutely. So if you've ever been curious about automating tasks on the web, this deep dive is for you.
I can't wait to break it all down. The term headless browser might sound a bit intimidating at first.
Yeah, it kind of conjures up images of like a robot with no head fumbling around in the dark.
Uh-huh, right. But it's actually a really elegant concept once you get past the name.
So how would you explain it to someone who's never encountered this before?
Well, imagine you take a web browser like Chrome or Firefox, the ones we use every day, and you strip away all the visual stuff, the window, the buttons, the address bar, all of that. What you're left with is the core engine of the browser, the brains of the operation, still working away in the background.
So it's like the browser's still doing its thing, visiting websites, fetching data, but we just can't see it happening.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so powerful for automation. We can harness all that functionality without having to deal with the visual overhead of a traditional browser.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture. But how do you actually interact with something you can't see? How do you tell this invisible browser what to do?
It's all about sending instructions, just like we do with any other software. It's a three-step process. First, you specify the website you want to target, just like typing a URL into your address bar.
So far, so good. What's next?
The really clever part comes next, using selectors. Think of these as little snippets of code that act like a treasure map, guiding the headless browser to specific elements on the page.
Oh, I like that analogy. So instead of just loading the entire web page, it's like we
Yeah,
can say, go straight to this button or find this specific piece of data.
you got it. And the final piece of the puzzle is injecting custom scripts, often written in JavaScript, to really orchestrate the actions we want the browser to take. This is where we can get really creative, defining complex interactions and automating entire workflows.
Hold on, does that mean you need to be a coding whiz to use headless browsers? Because I'll admit, my JavaScript skills are a bit rusty.
Not at all. That's where platforms like Latenode come in. They're all about the low-code movement, which means they handle a lot of the technical heavy lifting behind the scenes. You can build powerful automations without needing to write line after line of code.
Low-code platforms are definitely a game changer. It's like they're making this kind of technology accessible to a much wider audience.
Definitely. It's about empowering people to solve problems and automate tasks without needing a computer science degree.
I love that. But I'm curious to see what this looks like in practice.
Yeah.
What are the things you can actually do with headless browsers?
Oh, the possibilities are practically endless. But the article we're looking at today highlights some pretty fascinating use cases, specifically on the Latenode platform. One that caught my eye was how they're using headless browsers to mimic the functionality of those web browsing ChatGPT plugins.
Wait, you're telling me you can make a chatbot browse the internet like a human? I need to hear more about this.
It's pretty amazing. Imagine you're interacting with a chatbot, and you ask it a question that requires searching the web for information. Traditionally, chatbots have been limited to the data they were trained on, but
So how does the headless browser come into play?
the headless browser acts like the chatbot's eyes and hands, allowing it to go out and fetch that information in real time.
It's like giving the chatbot superpowers. Suddenly, it can access and process information from the entire internet?
Exactly. So when you ask the chatbot a question, it can trigger a headless browser to search Google, for example. The headless browser grabs the relevant info from the search results, and the chatbot uses that to give you a more comprehensive and up-to-date answer.
Mind blown. Latenode actually built this, right? It's not just a theoretical concept.
Yeah, they have a scenario set up on their platform where you can send a search query, and it'll return the top 10 Google results using a headless browser behind the scenes.
I'm so impressed by how they're making this technology tangible and practical. It's one thing to read about these concepts, but seeing them in action is a whole other level.
They're all about making this stuff accessible, which is really refreshing to see.
But it's not just about search, right? There are other ways they're using headless browsers on the Latenode platform.
Oh, definitely. They've got examples for things like data parsing, which is incredibly useful for anyone who works with online data.
Oh, tell me more. I'm always looking for ways to streamline my data gathering process.
Imagine you need to grab specific information from a web page, product prices, news headlines, or even just the titles from a landing page.
Oh, I've been there. hours spent manually copying and pasting data into spreadsheets. There has to be a better way.
Headless browsers to the rescue. Latenode has a scenario that scrapes all the titles, like H1 to H3 tags, from their own landing page, showing you how you can target specific elements to extract the exact data you need.
That is seriously cool. It's like having a custom-built web scraper at your fingertips.
And they also have an example that fetches real-time exchange rates from a website, which is super handy if you're working with financial data and there's no API available for a specific currency pair you need.
So it's like bypassing those traditional limitations and getting access to information that might otherwise be hidden.
Exactly. It's about unlocking possibilities and giving people more control over how they interact with the web.
This is blowing my mind. But I have to ask, what about forms? You know, those online forms that seem to multiply like rabbits these days?
Mm-hmm.
Surely there's a way to automate those tedious beasts.
You know it. Latenode has a scenario demonstrating how a headless browser can take care of that for you. It can locate those form fields, input the data you give it, and even hit that submit button, all without lifting a finger.
I'm sensing a theme here. Less manual work, more automation bliss.
Haha, that's the goal. Headless browsers can really streamline those repetitive online tasks that used to eat up so much time.
Okay, I am sold. I need to dive into Latenode and see all of this in action. But before we get lost in a world of automation, I'm curious to hear more about the broader implications of headless browsers. It feels like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible here.
You're absolutely right. Headless browsers are much more than just a cool tech trick. They're changing the way we interact with the web and opening up all sorts of possibilities for both coders and non-coders alike.
You know, it's funny, right? When you think about it, it's like we've had this whole layer of the web that's been kind of invisible to automation until now.
It is kind of mind-blowing when you put it that way. Like, we've been relying on APIs as the gateway to automation for so long, but
Right.
and APIs are great, don't get me wrong, but there are limitations, you know?
Totally. APIs are kind of like those preset menus at restaurants. You get what you get, and that's it.
Exactly. But with headless browsers, it's like having a personal chef who can whip up whatever you need, customized to your exact specifications.
So it's all about flexibility and control.
Exactly. With a headless browser, we can basically mimic any action that a human user can take on a website. Clicking buttons, filling out forms, navigating through menus, even interacting with those dynamic elements that load in as you scroll.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So even if there is an API available, a headless browser can sometimes be a better option.
Sometimes, yeah. Because sometimes APIs can be a bit restrictive. They might not give you access to all the data you need or allow you to do everything you want.
It's like they only give you the front door key, but with a headless browser, you've got the secret backdoor key, just in case.
Haha, exactly. So yeah, headless browsers can be a really valuable tool even for experienced developers who are comfortable with APIs. It's like having an extra set of tools in your automation toolkit.
So it sounds like we're not just talking about automating tedious tasks here. We're talking about fundamentally expanding the possibilities of what we can even do with automation online.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I think we're really just scratching the surface of what's possible with headless browsers.
Well, let's talk about some real-world examples then. I know the article we're looking at focuses on Latenode, which is this low-code platform that's making headless browsers more accessible to a wider audience.
They're doing some really cool stuff. One example that stood out to me was their solution for basically recreating the web browsing functionality of those ChatGPT plugins.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that. But how does that even work? How do you give a chatbot the ability to browse the web like a human?
Well, think about it this way. Traditionally, chatbots have been limited to the data they were trained on, right? So if you ask them a question that requires going out and searching the internet for information, they hit a wall.
Right, because they're stuck in their little bubble of knowledge.
Yeah.
So how does a headless browser change that?
It basically acts like the chatbot's eyes and hands, allowing it to go out and fetch that information from the web in real time.
So when you ask the chatbot a question, it can trigger a headless browser to do a quick Google search and then use that information to give you a more accurate answer.
Exactly. And what's cool is that Latenode actually has a scenario set up on their platform where you can send a search query and it'll return the top 10 Google results, all powered by a headless browser running behind the scenes.
That's incredible. It's like they've given chatbots a whole new level of intelligence by connecting them to the vast knowledge of the internet. What other use cases are they showcasing?
They've got a whole bunch. One that's really practical is data parsing, which is super useful for anyone who works with online data.
Oh, data parsing. Don't even get me started on the hours I've wasted manually copying and pasting data from websites into spreadsheets. It's the worst.
I feel you. But with a headless browser, you can automate that whole process. Imagine. You need to grab, like, product prices, news headlines, or even just the titles from a landing page.
Been there, done that. So how does a headless browser help?
You can basically instruct the browser to visit the website, target the specific elements on the page that contain the data you want, and then extract that data and organize it however you need it.
It's like having a personal web scraper that works tirelessly in the background. I'm already feeling more productive just thinking about it.
Exactly. And Latenode has some great scenarios demonstrating this. One of them scrapes all the titles from their own landing page, so you can see how it works in practice.
That's a great way to learn by example. It helps to see how these concepts actually translate into real-world scenarios.
And they even have a scenario that shows how to fetch real-time exchange rates from a website, which could be really valuable for anyone working with financial data, especially if there's no API available for a specific currency pair.
I'm loving how headless browsers are like the ultimate workaround when traditional methods fall short.
They definitely open up a lot of possibilities.
Speaking of possibilities, I can't let you go without talking about forms. Those endless online forms that seem to pop up everywhere you go. There's got to be a way to automate that madness.
You already know it. Latenode's got you covered there, too. They have a scenario showing how a headless browser can handle those forms for you. It's like having a virtual assistant who tirelessly fills out all those fields and hits the submit button for you.
Now that is what I call living the dream. No more carpal tunnel from endless form filling.
Yeah, headless browsers can really free up your time and mental energy for more important things.
This is all so impressive. I'm already picturing all the ways I can use headless browsers to automate my own life.
That's the spirit. But before you go off and build your automation empire, it's worth noting that headless browsers do have a few limitations.
Oh, right. I was just about to ask you that. Nothing's perfect, right? So what are the downsides?
One thing to keep in mind is that they can be a bit resource intensive. Since they're essentially running a full browser instance in the background, they can eat up a fair amount of memory and processing power.
So if you're working on a, super old computer, you might want to be mindful of that.
Exactly. And it's also worth noting that interacting with websites can sometimes get a bit tricky, especially if the website's structure changes a lot or relies heavily on JavaScript to render its content.
So headless browsers aren't exactly a magic solution for every automation problem.
Right. They're powerful, but it's important to understand both their strengths and limitations before you dive in headfirst.
That's great advice. So for our listeners who are feeling inspired and want to explore this world of headless browsers, where's a good place to start?
I definitely recommend checking out Latenode. Their platform makes it super easy to get started with headless browsers, even if you're not a coding expert.
And they have all those awesome templates that let you see these concepts in action, which is a huge help.
Absolutely. And don't forget about their Discord community. It's a great place to connect with other folks who are interested in headless browser automation, ask questions, share ideas, and get support along the way.
I love it. A whole community of automation enthusiasts cheering each other on. It sounds like a really supportive environment.
It is. It's a great example of how technology can bring people together and foster a sense of shared learning and collaboration.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored what headless browsers are, how they work, the incredible range of things they can do, and even some of their limitations. And we've seen how platforms like Latenode are making this technology accessible to everyone.
It really feels like we're at the beginning of something special with headless browsers.
Totally. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a bit of a challenge, something to think about as they explore this world of automation. We've talked about all the cool things headless browsers can do, like web scraping and form filling and even making chatbots smarter. But now I want to shift gears a bit.
Intrigued. Where are we headed?
Instead of focusing on all the external things we can automate, I want us to think about our own digital lives. You know, those everyday tasks that we do online, often without even thinking about it.
Oh, I see where you're going with this. It's so easy to get stuck in those routines, those repetitive actions that we just accept as part of life.
Exactly. But what if we could reclaim some of that time and mental energy by automating those tasks?
That's a powerful thought. It's like taking back control of our digital lives.
Exactly. So, dear listener, I want you to take a moment and think about your own online routines. What are those tasks that feel like a drain on your time and energy?
It could be anything, really. Checking a bunch of websites for updates, entering data into spreadsheets, even just remembering to back up important files.
And I bet if you really thought about it, you could come up with a whole list of things that could potentially be automated with a headless browser.
Oh, absolutely. And the beauty of it is that you don't need to be a coding expert to do it. Platforms like Latenode are making this kind of automation accessible to everyone.
It's all about working smarter, not harder. And who knows? Maybe you'll even discover a hidden passion for automation along the way.
You might surprise yourself. It can be really fun to figure out how to automate those tasks that used to drive you crazy.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of headless browsers. We hope you've enjoyed the journey and learned a thing or two along the way.
It's been a blast exploring this technology with you. And remember, this is just the beginning. As more people discover the power of headless browsers, I think we're going to see a whole wave of innovation and creativity in the automation space.
It's an exciting time to be involved in the world of tech. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep automating.
And remember, the power to automate your digital life is in your hands. Until next time, happy automating.